School shootings in America have now hit their highest number in over 20 years. Wow, no surprise here, but this was a startling kind of number. This was done by the National Center of Education and Statistics. What did they find, Farron?
93 incidents in the 2020-21 school year. 43 resulted in fatalities, 50 involved injuries, but 93 shootings at schools here in the United States, public and private, which means on a typical 180-day school year, every other school day in this country, somebody's getting shot in one of our schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the problem with it is the statistics speak for themselves. I mean, you can't hide these statistics. These numbers have gone, I mean, they're startling numbers. This is the highest total in the history of keeping up with these kind of statistics. And you can only hope that, look, maybe some good comes out of the effort to do something. I mean, the red flag law, I love it. You know, I love the idea of enhanced background check for people that are under 21. The idea of if you've been convicted of abuse of any kind, of spousal abuse, you can't get a gun without having to jump through some hoops. This is all good stuff. The idea of having youth mental health facilities that are improved and expanded.
And I think the more I think about it, especially after seeing these numbers, that may be the big one. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, we understand we got more guns than anybody else. You and I have talked about that. But we got to get to the root of why this is even happening. Mm-hmm. You know, we have to get really into that psyche, talk to these people, try to figure out, avert problems before they happen. Because it is, as you and I have, again, talked about in recent weeks, it's not just that we have the guns. What is making these people want to use them against children? That's what we have to get to the heart of.
I think we've talked about this on other shows where the expansion of social media has also enhanced, almost put on steroids, the enhancement of bullying.
Yeah.
If you look at every one of these shooters, you go back, you take a look, it's the same pattern. You know, they've been called losers, and they're the folks that sit up in their room all day long at home, 8 hours a day on, you know, whatever they do. They're isolated. They're not really involved in what's going on around the school or whatever. And so it's that bullying aspect of social media is now coming to the forefront. As a matter of fact, some good friends of mine are bringing some cases that I think are going to prevail here, and that how does social media enhance the ability and actually promote this notion of bullying? I think there's something to this, and the best article I've seen about this overall picture talks about that with each one of these people, each one of these kids that have been involved in this. There's been some history of that.
Well, and you know, another part of that too, the other side of it really is that not only are these people experiencing more bullying because of the online presence, they also have their own communities of people who, you know, kind of have the same issues, where they talk about violence, where they all, you know, kind of feed off one another.
You're talking about blog,
yeah, message boards and things like that. And so you get these people who hype up these feelings of hate that you have. So that's another big part of it. You know, that's the second half.
But that's a social media vehicle.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, with the mental health screenings and things like that, we have to start teaching parents, like, look for these signs, because it's not just the kids, the parents. Be an active parent.
Be a damn leader, a parent.
Really.
Walk into the room and say, "What the hell are you doing, kid?
Yeah.
You know what? Let me read what you've done on this computer." I mean, it doesn't take a lot to do that.
Sometimes it really is as simple as saying, hey, turn that, come on, let's play Monopoly.
Yeah.
Let's play a board game. Let's play Scrabble. And I'm not kidding. I mean, look, I have a 19-year-old who has moved out of the house, and he calls us every now and then. He says, "Hey,
let's play Scrabble.
Can I come over? We'll do like a game night."
Yeah.
Because those little things like that do have such an impact, and that falls on the parents. That's not on the kid. That's on the parents.
Hey, what's wrong with walking through the door and saying, you know, Mary, Joe, I want to see what you're doing. Let me take a look at your history on your. I want to see what you're up to. What's wrong with that? The Supreme Court says that Bayer can't escape liability for the people injured by Roundup. Now, this, first of all, to begin with, this is a company, this is Monsanto, that was sold to Bayer.
Right.
Whoever the numbnut was who bought this company, I mean, I hope that person's been fired and that they never work for the corporation again. They were advised, Bayer was advised to go in and buy Roundup. That was after 3 major lawsuits had determined that the folks, the Monsanto, had been lying and phoning up rat studies. They knew that the product would cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Right. The information was overwhelming. And some CEO says, "Hey, looks like a good idea. We'll go buy this company." Right. Take it from there.
Well, I think it had to be the attorneys that are representing them, the defending attorneys, because this is a strategy here. They keep losing. $25 million case in California. They try to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says we're not going to listen to it. But this isn't the first time they've tried to take a settlement all the way up to the Supreme Court, is it, Mike?
Let me give a shout out for Biden on this. Biden got in the way of them doing this. He actually had his Attorney General do something real significant, which is go before the Supreme Court and say, you should not accept this review. We have all the information we need to understand this is bad, bad stuff. We know glyphosate is killing people all over the world. And I'm going to send my Attorney General to say this is a bad idea. Now, Trump, just the opposite. Trump said, no, you need to hear this. We need to protect Monsanto. We need to protect Bayer. Now, listen, WHO had come out 10 years ago now, came out and said, this is bad stuff that's killing people all over the world in third world countries, because we were telling the world, hey, without Roundup, without glyphosate, we're going to have a food shortage. WHO came out and said that's a lie.
Well, but our EPA approved it.
Yeah.
And that's what's used in the cases against your firm, against all the firms that are representing the victims of this. That's what's used against them. The other thing that we found, and I started looking at this story for a while ago, you got the state of Mississippi, they actually recommend Roundup to kill all the weeds before you prepare for the crop.
There's a reason for it. When I took depositions in this case, I took 5 major depositions even before the first one went to trial. And what we saw was that they're masters of putting their people in important political positions. Matter of fact, they were so good at it that they had 3 people that were basically running the EPA. They had people in the White House that had come up through the ranks and now were advising Trump about this and that, dealing with the product. They were masters of doing that all the way down to the state level. So it doesn't surprise me. It wasn't just Mississippi that did that, by the way. There's about 14 states that jumped on the Monsanto bandwagon and said, hey, this is a great idea. All the information showed that this company knew 50 years before they were selling it, that it was killing rats and they understood the science. It was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Right. They phonied it up. They covered it up, and here's where it really gets ugly. The EPA knew it, and they bought into it anyway.
Well, and they have settled. There's been a couple of, $11.6 billion settlement, but they didn't decide about the future cases, and that's what's biting them in the butt.
The future cases are going to be a disaster because it's a slow process. Right. It's a latent cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You may be exposed year 1 and may not have any symptoms for 5 or 6 years beyond that. Right. So that's what they need to be worried about it. They shouldn't put the product on. The people who did it should be prosecuted. Right. They should be perp walked, and unfortunately, we don't do that to people that are dressed up in suits.